Hi friends, welcome to Raising Lifelong Learners. I'm your host, Colleen Kessler, and this is the podcast where I encourage you to trust yourself and your differently wired kiddos as you help cultivate their curiosity, encourage them to discover the world around them, embrace who they are wired to be, all while helping them discover their passions, interests, and raise them to become the amazing adults they're meant to be. Hey, welcome back. This is episode 322. Today we're going to talk about a topic that comes up actually a lot when you're talking to especially new homeschoolers, the question of how do you handle critics or well-meaning relatives who are telling you you should or shouldn't homeschool, especially your neurodivergent kids when they are special needs and your well-meaning family members tell you that they belong in school. What do you do? I promise you I have some answers for you. And I have a little bit of insight too as to why some people ask us questions about homeschooling in a way that feels aggressive to us, but doesn't feel overreaching to them. Let's talk about it. But first, let's give a special shout out and thank you to CTC Math for the support that they give to the homeschool community and this podcast in particular. We appreciate their sponsorship. If you're looking for a great math program, check out ctcmath.com, or for a special offer, click through the link on the show notes page for this episode or the description on your favorite podcast app. ctcmath.com is a great resource, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it later on today. But first, pop your earbuds in and let's get on with today's episode. Hey there, welcome back. Today we are talking about something that nearly every parent who is homeschooling their kids, especially if you're homeschooling neurodivergent kids, has heard at one time or another or experienced at one time or another over the course of their homeschooling. Critics. Sometimes they're strangers, sometimes they're family members, sometimes they're friends. Sometimes they're people who genuinely care about you and your children, and somehow those can be the hardest conversations of them all. Because it's one thing to dismiss a random internet comment saying how it's irresponsible to homeschool your children or you shouldn't be doing it. But it's another thing when your great aunt says, are you sure this is enough school? Or are you sure they're learning enough? Or when your favorite uncle says, when are they going to real school? Or when someone looks at your autistic child and they're having a hard time and says, they just need more discipline. Or if they were in school, they'd be learning how to handle the real world. Or a well-meaning friend asks you, what about socialization? Again, for the 500th time. If you've ever left a family gathering questioning yourself, if you've rehearsed conversations in your head for hours afterwards, going over what you could have said or what you should have said or what you wish you'd said, if you've ever felt angry, defensive, hurt, exhausted, or just plain tired of explaining your choices, this is the episode for you. I want to say that there's so much noise online and in person, and so many people have so many different opinions. And before I say anything else on this podcast, I just want to remind you that you are your child's parent and you know your child better than anybody else knows them. And you are the one constantly figuring out what is best for your individual child on a day-to-day, year-by-year basis. Therefore, you really truly are the absolute most qualified to decide how your child's education will unfold, what type of parenting your child needs, and who is the best person or people to have in your child's life. You really do know your child well, and you are really the perfect parent for your exact child, and they are exactly the child meant for you. Anytime anyone says anything, I just want you to remember that. I also want to say that I am never on this podcast or in my social media or in any of my writing going to tell you flat out there is one best way to educate or parent a child. There's not one perfect situation that fits everyone. And the internet is very noisy. I have very good friends whom I've met at conferences, I've spoken with, I've been on panels with, I do collaborations with or have, who put down hard lines on social media about homeschooling in a specific way being the only way that is going to work for your child, or things that you may or may not be doing for your kid, and how those are setting you up for failure. And I just want to say that you need to take everything you read or watch or see online and use your own critical thinking and your own experiences to filter that stuff, that noise, through so that you can get to the best possible decisions and outcome for your family, and trust yourself in the process. I was just watching a TikTok of somebody that I knew, and this person was going on and on about their opinion on how you can mess up your child. And one of those examples was sending your child to school in any way, shape, or form. And that included like hybridization. So sending them for specific classes because you're giving away your ability to shape their worldview. And from the perspective of a gifted specialist who has spent years and years studying and working with and on the deep dives into the social and emotional needs of neurodivergent, particularly gifted children, there couldn't be anything further from the truth. Do I think homeschooling amazing and wonderful and a gift to the vast majority of neurodivergent kids? Absolutely. It is the only way you can completely and totally ensure a prescriptive education, an education that is prescribed exactly in the way that your child needs it. Do I think that means not going and taking some classes at a school or participating in programs at a school if it benefits your child or if it leads into or towards some of their specific interests, passions, or gifts? No, absolutely not. I think that's where we get to the situation of like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We're getting rid of too much instead of taking advantage of all the resources available to us. My daughter had great experiences in a theater program that was run through an all-boys Catholic prep school. Were there some things that I would have preferred her not be exposed to? Absolutely. Were there some things that taught her why she didn't really ultimately want to be in a school all day? Yeah. But were there some things that were really beneficial socially, emotionally, and for her future? Yeah. She got the opportunity to participate in some awards programs and some master classes that I would have never been able to expose her to. And so that was a benefit. Both her and my now 16-year-old, she's graduated, my 18, almost 19-year-old, and then my 16-year-old coming up is going to be a junior. They will both have taken classes at our local community college in person through their high school college credit plus program that we have in Ohio. They will be in classrooms with teachers that aren't me and with high schoolers and college students. And I think there's a huge benefit to that because they're ready for it. Now, again, the one was ready for it 2 years ago. She's going into her sophomore year of college. My 16-year-old's ready, and she needs that exposure, and she needs some classes that she'll be better off getting from other people because I just don't have that advanced level of science. Here's the thing. You know your child absolutely and positively inside and out, and you know what's best for them. So trust yourself, trust your gut, and take the information and the advice from people around you in person and online that works for you and your family, and then let go of the rest. And if you're at a point where you're unsure of a direction to go, reach out to experts. I do coaching calls. You can schedule a coaching call with me and get on my schedule, pay for 1 hour or an hour and a half of undivided attention. And we will sit down and we will hash these things out. We will dive into all of the pros and cons. There are experts who can answer quick questions. I can answer quick questions via email. I can sit down with you for intense time. You can join the Learners Lab and pick my brain every month and through the DMs in there. There are resources for you if you're ever unsure, but the bottom line is you know your child and you know how to customize an education. I have a friend whose kids went to their local public high school halftime and did the rest of their stuff at home. And they were considered homeschoolers who took classes at the high school. There's a lot of different options for you. You need to do what's best for your family. And while you're doing what's best for your family and your specific kids, you need to remember that other people are going to have opinions in your everyday life. And so we're going to talk today about why those conversations hurt so much, how to separate the criticism from the concern, when to educate and when to disengage, because there are times for both. Practical advocacy scripts that you can use to pull out when you just don't really know what to say, and then how to develop the kind of calm confidence that protects your peace. And I will be the first to admit it. I didn't always have that calm confidence. There were many times that I stammered my way through explanations and tried to defend my choice to homeschool. And now if somebody talks about it or asks, what about socialization, or what if they do this, or what if they're going to be weird, I just calmly say, this is what's best for our family right now. And I leave it at that. I have a calm, confident peace about me, and I don't engage unless it's somebody that's very close to us and has a very genuine concern. I want you to know that you don't need everyone to agree with you and your decisions in order for those decisions to be right for your family. Okay? So let's dive in. These conversations feel super personal because they come from emotions and they tap into an emotional piece of us. Many parents tell me, I know I shouldn't care what people think, but I do. And honestly, that's normal. It's totally normal to care what other people think. And parenting and homeschooling are deeply personal. Supporting a neurodivergent kid is deeply personal. They're not abstract decisions that you're making. They're very concrete. They're every day, they're with your whole heart, and they're for people you love more than anything else, your kids. And they're very visual. People can't help but notice you're homeschooling. Conversations come up all the time. Oh, where do your kids go to school? Actually, they're homeschooled. Oh, why are you out today? Are you sick? No, we're homeschooled. So people are going to question. So when people question these decisions, it can feel like they're questioning your competence, your commitment, your judgment, your child's potential, even when, and this is important to remember, it can feel like that even when that's not their intention. And I would say, from the optimist in me, that it's not their intention the majority of the time. The majority of the time, I would say, from my own experience, of course, this is anecdotal, most people truly are just curious or don't understand or don't know what they don't know. And then sometimes underneath that criticism, there's another fear that they have. They have a fear of, what if they're right? Most parents, all parents actually, carry some degree of uncertainty with them throughout every aspect of their life, right? You're always worried you're not doing everything your kid needs. You're not making the right choices. And some of those parents that criticize you or ask you why you're doing what you're doing or how you're doing what you're doing, they're uncertain too because they're human. They have a vulnerability where they're worried that you're onto something they don't really know about or understand. And it threatens the decisions that they're making. I remember, I was just talking to somebody recently about this. When we first started homeschooling, I didn't know anybody. I didn't know anybody that homeschooled. I had found some blogs online. I had done my research as much as I could, but there really wasn't a ton out there. There was more than there was out there for some of my predecessors. But we've been homeschooling 17 years now, and the world was a very different place. We didn't have all these blogs and social media. Instagram wasn't even created yet. So it was a very vulnerable time, and we were all very uncertain. But I remember when I first pulled my oldest son out of first grade in February to homeschool, I was already working from home. I was working from home as a freelance writer and taking assignments during the day. And I had been working from home as a freelance writer for about 2 years. So maybe three. I'm trying to think, was it two? No, I guess I was just, so I was, it was about a year, maybe two. Anyway, it had to have been a couple years that I was freelance writing because I had two kids I had at home. I had my 3-year-old daughter and my nursling daughter, my baby daughter. So my two girls were already born, and I had pulled Trevor out of first grade. So yeah, it was about 3 years in, and I had a mother's helper that came 3 days a week for 5 hours to watch the baby and the preschooler and bring the baby to me to nurse while I did my freelance writing assignments. I was doing a lot of educational writing and textbook chapter writing and stuff like that. And so I had all sorts of assignments. And she had kids. She lived in the neighborhood with us. So it was very convenient. She wanted to earn a little bit of money while her kids were at school. Her youngest was the same age as Trevor. And so they were in school together, not in the same classroom, but in the same building. And when I pulled him home to homeschool, she questioned it a lot. And one of it felt to me at the time that she was extra critical. And she ended up leaving the job, not wanting to be a mother's helper to a first grader and the preschooler and baby. But she also made several comments that made me feel, and I'm pretty intuitive when it comes to things like that the real reason she was so upset about my decision to bring my son home was that she felt it was a commentary on her choices, that I was saying the education at that school was not good enough. And thus she felt, since her children went to the same school and were in kindergarten and first grade respectively, that I was saying that if she kept her kids in that school, she was making the wrong choice. When the exact opposite is my belief. I believe that everybody needs to make their own choices when it comes to any kind of education for their children. And that school and that particular classroom and that particular teacher was not a great fit for my kid. It was, by all accounts, a great fit for other kids. So it was not a commentary on any of those things, but she had an underlying fear that I was actually right. And so my decision to pull my kids felt to her like a criticism of her choices. And so turning it around and throwing it back on me was really just a reflection of her own insecurities. And that happened many times. So we get these questions and these comments and these things, but it feels very personal because we also are struggling with uncertainty. We go every day wondering if we're doing the right thing, if we're doing enough, if we're doing too much, if we're not doing the right stuff, if we should get them more involved in this or less involved or whatever. But criticism lands on top of all that existing vulnerability, and so it hurts us. But I want all of us, me included, to remember that not every critic is the same. One of the most helpful mindset shifts is realizing that not everybody asking a question belongs in the same category. So let's break down some of the categories of people that might be asking us, questioning us, or just criticizing us about our homeschooling choice. Category 1 is genuinely curious people. These people genuinely want to understand. They ask respectful questions. They ask thoughtful questions. They ask great follow-up questions. These conversations can be really productive and instructive and a pleasure to take part in. The second category is concerned people. They're often grandparents or relatives or close friends. They're worried, not because they dislike your choices, but because they love your child. Their information might be outdated and they just want to understand, and they're worried that you're making a decision potentially from emotions and not from what's actually best for your kid, because they have an idea and an understanding of what is best based on their own experiences. We see this often in other aspects of parenting, right? When our parents or our grandparents say, when I was a parent, I would just blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And you should just do that too because it worked for them or it worked for you, when actually the humans evolve all the time and change. And parenting strategies change too because we are all living in different experiences, but their intentions come from a place of care. The third category is opinion holders. These people have already decided there is nothing you're going to say that is going to change their opinion. They're not seeking information, they are seeking confirmation, and they're going to do everything in their power to find that confirmation. Education rarely changes these conversations. This is the category you're going to find online a lot, and you're going to find it online on both sides of the equation. Here's the thing, I don't believe that there are absolutes in anything related to parenting and education. I think there's room for nuance, and I think we need to remember that, which is one of the reasons that getting online bothers me so much, especially in recent years. And you may or may not have noticed because, again, there's so much noise online, but I don't post as consistently on social media as I once did. I'm trying to get better and I'm trying to get back onto social media because I think it's really important to hear different perspectives and to have, frankly, a sense of calm, reassurance in the categories of parenting and homeschooling. And I think that a lot of the discourse out there has become too polarizing. But that's also one of the reasons I've struggled to be online because I don't want necessarily to be polarizing. And nor do I believe that there are distinct rights or wrongs when it comes to parenting and education. I think we have an obligation to teach our kids, educate our kids in the best way for their individual needs as we possibly can, whatever that looks like. I know somebody, actually, they were on the podcast way back in the early days, whose kid is an 11-year-old PhD. He's not anymore. He just turned 18. He was an 11-year-old PhD candidate. He just turned 18 and he's got multiple degrees. He's amazing. And Elliot and his mom, Michelle, were interviewed in the past, and I'll link to them in the show notes. And that was right for Elliot. That was right for him. I have a friend whose daughter, profoundly gifted, amazing, brilliant, and was taking classes at a Chinese immersion school since kindergarten and is bilingual now. Neither of her parents are Chinese. It was just something that fascinated her when she was little, and her parents helped her find the resources. I also know families who homeschool using a boxed curriculum that lays everything out, and they follow the teacher's guide to a T, and it works for them. I know families who have kids that go to public school, some other kids that go to private school, and one or two kids that homeschool. I know some families that have severely special needs kids that they just can't meet all of the needs for as a parent. So they go to a school for part of the day while mom homeschools the rest of the children, and then the kid comes home in the afternoon. And I know parents who completely and totally unschool, putting lots and lots of learning opportunities in front of their children. And then I know many parents in families like mine who homeschool in a very eclectic, hybridized way with a specific focus on strengths and interests. There are all manner of education. There are all manner of parenting styles. And what's right for you isn't necessarily right for others, and vice versa. But you're going to find a lot of opinion holders who don't want to listen to why you've chosen to do what you want to do. They just want to tell you why you're wrong. And then there are our chronic critics. Nothing's going to satisfy them, nothing. Not test scores proving that your children are just fine, not thriving children, not evidence. Recognizing this can save tremendous emotional energy. There are people who still question my choice to homeschool. And one of my kids graduated and started his own business and is now going back to school because he just wants a degree, but he's got a thriving freelance business. Another one of my kids went immediately into a BFA program straight out of high school, straight out of our homeschool high school, and applied academically to 33 schools because the audition process is crazy and you need to cast a wide net, and was academically accepted with significant merit to every one of the 33 schools she applied to. I think homeschooling is going just fine, but there are still people who will tell me that I should think about something different for my other two. So they're not going to be satisfied if they're choosing not to be satisfied. And so figuring out which category the people who are commenting or questioning fall into is going to save you a lot of emotional energy. And that will help you lean into understanding and internalizing the difference between explaining and defending. That distinction changed everything for me. Explaining says, here is our reasoning, meaning this is what's right for our family at this time. Defending says, please approve of my reasoning. One of them comes from confidence, one of them comes from fear. And many homeschool parents spend years defending. I spent years defending because all I knew was my own teaching experience, my husband's teaching experience, and all of our friends' teaching experience. And so I always felt that when anybody questioned me, I didn't fall back on the fact that I had a master's degree in education. I said, we're just going to give it a try and see how it works, or this is what I think is right for me right now. And then I would be like, this wasn't working in school, and this wasn't working in school. I was defending and trying to get them to agree with me. But what I really should have been saying was, our reasoning is this. This wasn't working out, and so we're trying something different. But we're going year by year and kid by kid to see what happens. We don't know what tomorrow brings, so we're just going to keep doing the best we can and educate our children to the best of our ability. When we spend all those years defending, it feels like we're trying to prove that we are qualified to do it, that our children are actually learning, that the accommodations that we're making in our homeschool are necessary, and that homeschooling works. But eventually, many of us discover that not everyone is owed an explanation, and not every question requires a detailed answer. You've heard the saying before, I'm sure, no is a complete sentence. It goes right along with this kind of thing. Because we are choosing to, or because it's right for our family, is a complete answer. You don't owe anybody a detailed definition or description of why it's right for your family. You simply saying, homeschooling is right for us right now, so this is what we're choosing, is enough. Done. And it's okay to leave it at that. I will say, if the questioners fall into that category of the people who genuinely care about your kids, they are close family, close friends, and they're just concerned because they love your child, a little bit more detail in your description and explanation might be loving and kind. You don't owe it to them, but it might be loving and kind. So consider the audience and then recognize if you've got one of those categories of people that are not going to be swayed anyway because they have their own opinion, and then don't defend. So I've been using CTC Math for years now, and I have to say, one of the things I love most about it is its adaptability. CTC gives you access when you subscribe to all of their levels. You get access immediately to grades kindergarten through calculus. So it's perfect for kids who have an asynchronous learning profile, meaning they are many different ages at once, because sometimes concepts will come really quickly for asynchronous kids, and sometimes they'll come a little bit more slowly. But CTC, having all of those levels up front, right at your fingertips, allows your kiddos to work at their own pace. If they understand something and they get the concept super quickly, they can accelerate through it and do multiple levels in one day, sometimes even getting through multiple grade levels in a school year. And then when they hit some of the more challenging math and maybe it's not as intuitive for them, they can slow down and they can take a little bit longer. It is perfect for neurodivergent families, especially those who are homeschooling asynchronous and or gifted kiddos. If you're looking for a new math program for your family and you're looking for one that is easily tailored to the kids that are in your home, the learning profiles you currently have, and it's completely affordable, one price for all grade levels for all of your family and kids, and comes with a money-back guarantee and people who really truly care about your kids learning their math, you need to check out ctcmath.com. Now, you could either go over straight to ctcmath.com and check it out, or you could head over to the show notes for this episode or in the description on your favorite podcast app and click through that. When you click through that, it automatically applies a special offer that CTC has just for Raising Lifelong Learners listeners, and I'd hate to have you miss out on that if you were purchasing. It's a great deal. It's actually the deal that we use too, because I do subscribe and pay for my subscription. I've been a customer of CTC Math for close to a decade now, and I still pay for my subscription. And I'd love for you to be able to take advantage of the same offer. So check them out, ctcmath.com, or head over to the show notes at raisinglifelonglearners.com/podcast and click on the CTC link through there, and it will automatically apply the special discount that it has for Raising Lifelong Learners listeners. All right, let's get back to today's episode. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the different categories of people, where they fall, what kinds of things are owed an explanation and are not, and why we can trust that we know our kids best and we're doing what's right for them. But let's get practical. Let's come up with some practical scripts for common comments that we hear so that we have some scripts in our back pocket. And if you're listening to this, don't worry about writing these scripts down. You can always find a blog post article type version, not straight transcripts of the podcast, because I'm talking, and I don't know about you, but reading, talking transcripts never actually feels the same as listening to the podcast. So I take the episode and I write it into an article. So there will be an article on the show notes page for this episode, but it will have all of these scripts written out so that you can print them out or copy them or whatever. You don't have to remember them right now. So what about socialization? The response could be simple. I'm not really worried about that. She sees a lot of people, but you could also say, we've actually found that homeschooling gives us more flexibility to pursue social opportunities, and then pause, because there's no dissertation required with that. That question is honestly so absurd in our current climate, because there are so many opportunities. There are extra classes, there are co-ops, there are play groups, there are playground meetups, there are field trip groups, there are homeschool dances and projects and science fairs and you name it. And then on top of it, depending on the state you're in, your kids could potentially participate in classes at the schools if they want to, in sports, in theater, and other extracurricular activities. There's so much opportunity. And yes, we as parents have to find it, but there's so much opportunity. So if someone asks you about socialization, you can internally roll your eyes. Don't roll your eyes at them because it's such a common question, but just say, there are so many opportunities. We have a lot of flexibility to be able to pursue them, and we find the right ones for our kids. And then the comment, when are they going back to school? You can say, one of the things that I've said in the past was, I'm taking it kid by kid and year by year. You could also say, we're really happy with how things are going right now, and so we're just looking at right now. Or you can say, we're planning on homeschooling all the way through high school, but we'll see how it goes. So have an answer like that, just ready to go. And then the comment, which is so bothersome, right, to a parent of neurodivergent kids who are differently wired and just may need some more support. They just need more discipline. No, not always. And so you could say, we've learned that support works better than punishment for our child. So we're working on the support systems to help accommodate their needs so that they're better able to advocate for themselves as they grow. And I'm saying this as a person who does not believe that a diagnosis excuses dangerous behavior or behavior that takes away other people's rights, because I think that both neurodivergent and neurotypical people have the same rights. I think that we dismiss neurodivergent people's rights more often than neurotypicals, but the truth is, it's not more discipline needed, it's more support needed and more advocacy and more tools in their toolbox. And so by simply saying, we've learned that support works better than punishment for our child, and so we're offering the support that they need so that they can grow into the person they're meant to become. A comment that says something like, oh, they seem behind, or are they getting the right kind of education? You can say, we focus on growth, not comparison, and we are keeping an eye on all of their benchmarks, all of their skills. This is something I heard a person online very recently, somebody that I think has some wonderful information and background and skills. This person is not a reading specialist. This person has a master's degree in education, but doesn't have a specific degree related to reading or special needs. And they were saying online that one of their gripes about homeschooling families, and this is a homeschool advocate, is that it's when parents say that they're not worried about their kids falling behind, or that their kids will catch up, or that the reading will come, or it's developmental. And she was saying that no, it needs early intervention. And the truth is that both perspectives are right. I've worked with thousands of neurodivergent children, and it is very true that somebody with a specific reading challenge, like dyslexia, benefits from early intervention. And there are signs that could say that maybe dyslexia is worth looking into. But I've also worked with a lot of families whose children and the children who have asynchronous brains, and they're not actually behind cognitively, nor do they have a learning challenge. Their brains are cognitively advanced and focused in on one specific academic area more so than the other. And developmentally, their reading is lagging a bit, not because of inability, not because of a challenge, but because their brain is 7 grade levels ahead in math. And so in that type of case, we don't need early intervention. What we need is working on our kids' strengths and then encouraging them, once they're riding the high of the success of whatever, in the example I used, math that they were doing, to come in and do some short bursts of reading activities and lessons. Yes, when there is a legitimate challenge, a legitimate neurodivergence when it comes to reading or language acquisition or processing, early intervention can help tremendously. And so we want to be aware when our kids aren't reading early on where their neurotypical peers fall, as well as in what areas are they achieving in an advanced way, and really hone in on what else are we seeing. Because if it's a reading challenge like dyslexia or a processing challenge like auditory processing, it will show up in different areas. But if our child is able to read nonfiction books about animals, but they're not able to read and comprehend their fiction, it's not necessarily dyslexia, it's interest. And so we just have to be I think that we really have to be careful personally as experts, as people who have degrees and background and are advocating on a platform, about absolutes. Because we're not dealing with widgets, we're not dealing with programs, we're not dealing with AI bots, we're dealing with people, we're dealing with children. And so somebody telling you that your child seems behind does not know your whole child. If it's an expert who does know your child and has seen some things that are concerning, it's worth listening to. It's worth saying, okay, thanks for bringing that up. I'll do a little bit of research. We have been focusing on growth and maturity and developmentally appropriate materials instead of comparing to everybody, but I can see where your concern is, so I'll check it out. So thanks. If it's somebody, again, that falls into one of those categories of criticism that's looking for something to nitpick, then you can say, actually, they're exactly where they're meant to be. We know how our kids are progressing, so thank you. You don't see them on a day-to-day basis. So again, take everything that you read and that you hear and that you watch with kind of a grain of salt, and the knowledge that you know your child best. I think it's really important to be careful anytime you hear absolutes anywhere. Anybody that says absolutely reading is developmental, you don't have to worry about it, they'll get it when they get it, is not somebody that you should be listening to. Anybody that says reading is not developmental and you should absolutely intervene early on if they're not reading by 5 or 6 is not somebody you should listen to. Anybody that says this is the absolute perfect curriculum for your neurodivergent or your gifted or your dyslexic or your ADHD or your autistic child is not somebody you should be listening to, because neurodivergent children are just as discrepant and atypical from one another as they are from the neurotypical population. And so it is important to remember that you know your child best, and you can gather the information that you have, but you need to run it through the filter of who your child actually is and what they need. And again, seek out support if you're ever overwhelmed and confused about this, because you're worth it and so is your child. And so I don't want anybody listening to this to be like, okay, that just makes it even worse. I don't know what I'm doing right and what I'm not doing right, and I don't know who to listen to. Reach out. Reach out to me, schedule a coaching call, reach out to somebody else. If it's an area that you think that they would do better, just find somebody to talk to that you trust, because it's worth it to get clarity. And again, to focus on your individual child and their needs and not a generalized statement. The comment, "I could never homeschool," is one of my favorites, because you can just say, that's okay. Everybody makes different choices. Or, "I could never stick to the schedule of public school. I don't know how you do it." Whatever you want to have in your back pocket, you can come up with, because the truth is, no, not everyone could homeschool. And the truth is, not everybody should. But you could kind of take that any way that you want. Comments, "Are you sure you're doing enough?" Yeah, actually, we feel confident in the path that we're on. Notice what these responses all have in common. They're calm, they're brief, and they're not invitations to debate. They're simple, they're assertive, but they're kind. If you can stay in that calm, kind, peaceful response, then you're going to be, again, protecting your own inner peace. When the criticism comes from family, though, it can be tricky. It can feel like the hardest category to deal with, because family relationships matter. And because many relatives grew up with very different assumptions and very different experiences, and they don't know what they don't know. Remember that most grandparents aren't comparing your child to homeschoolers. They're comparing your child to their memories of school, and that's an important distinction. Many concerns come from unfamiliarity, from fear, from lack of information, and it's not hostility. Sometimes it just helps to share successes, projects, accomplishments, joyful moments. People understand stories better than explanations. And here's one. I remember my father-in-law who passed about 5 years ago, and he was just a great guy. But he could be gruff in one of those like teddy bear, grumpy old man, lovable kind of endearing ways. He definitely was like the grumpy old man, but he wasn't the grumpy old man shouting, "Get off my lawn." He was the grumpy old man that would be like really gruff, but then he'd cuddle you up in his lap and his whiskers would scratch your face. He was just one of those kinds of grumpy old teddy bear kind of guys. And he was like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "This is what we feel is best right now, and we're taking it kid by kid, year by year." But what I did was recognize he was concerned for my kids. He didn't have any experience with it, and he genuinely loved my kids. So we spent more time with him than we had before. I made sure he was invited to come over for dinner a couple times a month. Trevor, my oldest, who was very young at the time, went over to his house and stayed over a couple Thursdays a month to wake up on Friday mornings when all of his old money cronies would come over, and the train guys would go in the basement and build model trains while the wives gossiped upstairs and made dinner or brought a crock pot of, not dinner, lunch for them. And then Trevor would traipse upstairs and have lunch with them too. And he developed a relationship with my children that he was not able to develop with his other grandchildren, because they were in school all the time and they were busy with extracurricular activities. And so he saw firsthand not just the education that they were getting, though he did see some of that, but he really saw the relationships that they were able to cultivate, including with him and with each other. And he saw the interesting people that they were becoming because of the ability to have more of those conversations. And he was a convert by the end. But that was that I took that concerted effort because I knew his concerns were stemming from just concern over the people that he loved. But at some point, you're going to come up against people who they're just not going to get it. And so you need to know when to stop explaining. It might be the most important thing that you can do for yourself. You don't have to attend to every single argument that you've been invited into. Some conversations are not conversations. They're debates disguised as conversations, and they need to be disengaged with. Signs that it's time to disengage with a confrontation. There's repeated criticism. There are moving goalposts. Like, you can never satisfy their requirements for what's actually working. There's an unwillingness to listen. there's disrespect. They're just talking with either a disrespect period or a disrespectful tone, and there's constant judgment. You can say, we just see this differently, or I appreciate your concern, or we're comfortable with our decision, and then stop there. You don't have to go any further because, again, remember, you don't owe anybody an explanation. Confidence doesn't come from convincing everyone. It comes from your own experience, your own observations of your kids and what they're doing, your evidence, and knowing your child. The longer you homeschool, the more data you gather. You start to see the growth, you start to see the progress, you start to see the healing if homeschooling was in response to something. You start to see the confidence building within your kids and yourself, and you start to see the learning. Eventually, those observations matter more than outside opinions. So recognize that it feels worse when you're newer to homeschooling. As you continue throughout your homeschooling adventure, you'll get more and more confident because of all these things. That's what a calm confidence is. It's not certainty, it's trust that it is worth it. If you've been carrying criticism lately, or you've been questioning yourself, maybe you're about to embark on your first year of homeschooling. You're listening to this in late July, early August, and you're starting to question yourself because others are questioning you and you don't have any experience. So you're really starting to doubt. I want to remind you that nobody knows your child like you do. Nobody sees the hard days. Nobody sees the victories or the growth. Nobody sees the healing. Nobody sees the effort the way that you do. It doesn't mean you're always going to get every decision right. None of us do. Parenting is tough. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to be a different parent to our first kid than we are to our fourth kid. We're just going to be. Every one of my children has seen a different version of me, for better or for worse. And that's okay. It does mean, though, you're allowed to make thoughtful decisions without universal approval. You're allowed to trust what you're seeing and what your gut is telling you is best for your kids. And you're allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to advocate for your child with calm confidence. And you can do this. I have so much faith in you, and I'm so proud of you for making this decision. I'm here if you ever need support. We have an entire community in the Learners Lab of support for families just like you who are homeschooling quirky, creative, differently wired kids, neurodivergent, identified or not, and the parents who love them, the parents who also might have some neurodivergencies too. We are there for you inside the community, and you can join just by going over to the show notes or my blog and clicking on the lab button. There's also group coaching available on a rolling basis. That is a new kind of group will be rolling out pretty soon for that. We had a really great late spring small group, and we're going to be opening it up again for the fall. So if you want more concentrated support, a place where you can check in and get answers to questions and actual support designing your homeschool in a small group setting, that will be opening soon. And then, as always, if you want more targeted support to you and your family, I have one-on-one coaching related to homeschooling. I do some executive function coaching for you and or your children. I also do some college advising. I only take a couple clients each season for that. I do work with a group of coaches, a college consulting company for musical theater auditions, but specifically the focus, my role is the academic portion of it in the college applications. But I also do college advising for homeschool families who are looking into college in the starting usually of the summer between your junior and senior year. So you can reach out to me for information about that, but I'm always happy to meet with you and to work with you one-on-one or in a group. But I'd love to have you and your family in the Learners Lab. We have so much fun every single month and a lot of great themes coming up. I'll be back same time, same place next week with another episode. Another special thanks, as always, to CTC Math, our sponsor. If you need a great math program, you cannot go wrong. Plus, they have a money-back guarantee, so how can you pass that up? I'll talk to you soon. Enjoy your kids this week. Bye for now.